Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the People Analytics Podcast. I'm the host, Sean Boyce, CEO and founder of StaffGeek. I'd like to welcome my guest for this week, my friend Adrian Russo, who is the head of talent acquisitions at TRex Solutions. Hello, Adrian. How are you? And thank you for being on the show.
Hey, how you doing, Sean? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to get things started here, if you could please give, for both myself and our listeners, a background on what TRex Solutions is and what you do as head of talent acquisition there.
Sure. TRex is a cloud and cybersecurity company. We're actually the largest federal civilian cloud and cybersecurity company in the U.S. We provide more cloud and cybersecurity services to the federal government on the federal civilian side than any other cloud provider that's works with the federal government. Our largest contract is with the census. We were charged to move their mission critical systems to the cloud. And we're actually ramping up now with census enumeration. So all of our mission critical systems are actually being tested at the moment. And I think this year will be the first year that we see our work at TRex being on display with the census via enumeration. My job at TRex is actually as the head of talent acquisition. So what I do is I develop the organizational strategy and direction for talent acquisition at TRex. Both from a business systems perspective and from a people perspective. So what that means is I'm in charge of modernizing our systems, making sure that our product roadmap stays current for our business systems on the recruiting side, and then also developing the talent plan. I do that from the staffing perspective on the team, and then also the near-term and long-range plan for talent for the organization.
Sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy, especially now.
Very busy, especially with census gearing up to enumeration.
True. Yeah, very hot year for that, of course.
It is.
Excellent.
Exciting, though.
Thank you for that background. I agree that is exciting. If you could also tell us a little bit more about your background specifically and ultimately how you got into talent acquisition. I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your career path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off in recruiting with Department of Defense in 2007. I did a lot of work in the cyber community with, crypto linguists and electronic warfare. When I got out of DoD, I went to the private sector and continued recruiting for the Department of Defense in a lot of the same areas, focused almost exclusively on technical talent acquisition. One of the things I found that was difficult for me as a recruiter was, as we were working on these highly technical jobs, a lot of it I didn't really understand. And I said a lot of crazy things like, do you do Java? And it just doesn't make sense and people laugh at you. So I decided to go back to school and I actually got a master's in IT. And so for me, that was really helpful because it enabled me to not only better understand what, technical professionals do, but it also helped me to think of recruiting in different terms. So, I like to think, how I can apply technology to help solve recruiting challenges. That's something I actually did on my own in developing recruiting software solutions to do open source sourcing. So basically, to develop recruiting tools to find talent from the open web without the use of job boards. So really, I think my technical background is what led into, some of these recruiting methods that we use at TRex, and then also the methodology behind how I go about recruiting. I've been at TRex for a little over a year now. And, really what we've been focusing on there is, a lot of what I just mentioned, incorporating, a more modern and scalable approach to recruiting and talent acquisition and modernizing our business systems.
Very encouraging, and there's a lot to unpack there. In particular, talking about kind of the tools and the things that you've done to advance the work that you do. I definitely want to commend you for, like you said, when you're getting started and then having those initial conversations and wanting to be more like technically prepared in them, going back and doubling down on the industry expertise that I think would ultimately likely help you be even better in your career moving forward. I imagine that was kind of their inspiration behind that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it really was. That was the inspiration behind that. And really, I just had a passion for technology. And, for me, if I'm doing this job as recruiting, specifically technical recruiting, I have a lot of respect for the people who actually do the job day in and day out and just don't, aren't doing it from an academic perspective like I largely was. So for me, it was partially I wanted to get better at my profession, but also, a lot of it was, hey, I'm talking to these people every day. I should have enough respect that, I want to learn a little bit more about their profession, and really just I want to grow as a recruiter, to do the best I can to get to know what these individuals are doing and how I could best understand what they are doing to kind of find the right position for them or the right fit either within my organization or help them find the right place for them next in their career.
Excellent. So, having said that, shifting gears on to the main content of our show, obviously, our name of our show being People Analytics, which we interpret as that intersection between people and data. You've already mentioned a few things so far, which we'd love to talk more about, but I'd love to learn more from yourself as far as what you've done in industry to kind of live around this intersection and sharing those insights with both myself and our audience. We'd love to learn a little bit more with any of the work that you've done in or related to what we'd consider to be people analytics.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think broadly that I've done, and I think you could see this a lot at TRex, is around, we talked about the business systems a little bit, and everything that we do at TRex is metrics driven. So first we implemented, I want to start off just maybe taking it back a little bit, and this will help explain how we introduced, analytics to TRex and how this drives our recruiting efforts.
Please
So
do.
TRex was really, they were at a place where they had a really solid recruiting team. They were at a really good place recruiting. They had just won the census. They were doing well with the census contract, but they knew to scale that they needed to, all their business systems were coming up for renewal. They're at the end of life. So they knew when they came in, the person that they chose for this role, they would want someone that could select the right business systems that are modern, scalable, robust to meet their future talent needs and could take the organization to that next level talent-wise. So when I came in, what was important, I think, was to have some metrics behind what we're doing. So we can say, this works and here's why, and here's the data behind it. So the first thing that we did was we actually got rid of every single product they had. Everything, every job board, every resume database, our ATS. And really that was not because they selected poorly. You have to remember when you sign long licenses, especially in tech, you sign long licenses, 4-year licenses, 5-year licenses. By the time that's up, there have been other things that have come out in the marketplace that are more modern and robust. And I think that's what happened here. So what we did is we implemented an ATS called Greenhouse. Now, Greenhouse is it's a modern cloud-based ATS that's very robust and allows for API integration. It has an open API, so you could really do anything you want to it. The other thing that it does is everything that is performed in the system is tracked. Every action that's taken, every candidate that applies, every candidate phase is tracked. So you get detailed analytics on every single action that's performed. There's also logging, so you can see everything that happens or fails to happen within the organization. So there's also accountability. The reporting is fantastic. And if you have a little bit of a tech background, you can really extrapolate any type of data that you want. So I thought that was really important. Basically with Greenhouse, you could incorporate, other recruiting tools, either that you develop or that are out there in industry because of their open API. So really that allows us to build a customized recruiting platform and not just have an ATS or applicant tracking system. We could really make this what we want. And because everything that comes in, every piece of data that comes in is able to be extracted out, we can really create dynamic reports that tell us things like where our best lead source is coming from, where our best candidates come from by job, where the best candidates come from by job, by department, for specific hiring managers. So we could actually target and leverage those resources to find us the best candidates for the specific hiring managers, specific departments, and reduce our time to fill and time to hire across the organization, and be able to target problem areas where we're having challenges as a team, filling positions either quickly or with the right talent, and take a deep look at those metrics to see how we can improve. So I think that was one of the really important things that we did at TRex.
That's excellent. I have nothing but good things to say about Greenhouse as well too. Actually, StaffGeek has recently launched an integration with them because their product lines up so well with ours. So I'm curious to get your take on what your experience has been like working with them thus far. Seems like they've only continued to grow and be more successful. And it's very interesting to hear you talk about the customizability that exists. So I'd love to get your take on them, number one. And number two, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you have been able to do in a customized way using their tool, which has been better for TRex.
So we've been able to do a couple things in the past with Greenhouse. You know, I've performed 3 different integrations and implementations with Greenhouse, doing various things as far as customizing the product to suit organizational needs. One of the things that was interesting that we did in the past that we want to bring to TRex is having function-based services. So basically putting services, instantiating services in the cloud so that we have trigger-based automation to run these services seamlessly, to go out and get data from the web, specifically candidate data, ingest that and consume that data directly into Greenhouse and be able to process that. One of the first things on the roadmap, I would say, is a nightly search agent. It works nicely because if you run a nightly search agent, especially if you're searching the open web, you run into a lot of issues with either 404 or 503 responses. And if you're doing a nightly search agent, you have 12 hours to run that. So if you run into those issues, you just run it. Your Lambda function will keep running until it processes your request. So the theory behind it is if you're doing a nightly search agent, you have all that time to run the agent. And then when the recruiters come in the morning, their sourcing is done for them and they have a call list. So that's one thing we have on the product roadmap. Another thing is just doing things like integrating meetup groups. An item that was done in the past was integrating our meetup, our hosted meetup events and our sign up page with Salesforce. So when we have people sign up in Salesforce, that data then gets consumed into Greenhouse and is tracked as the candidate data is tracked as leads. So these leads then become people you could actionably call and contact for open positions. I mean, you have their resume, contact information, things like that. So when you're talking about people analytics and how you use data, it's all about, for me anyway, capturing all the recruiting data you can, no matter where it's coming from, in one centralized source. So whether you want to use that data or not, it's available to you to aggregate and look at to really glean meaningful insights from.
I want to jump back to some of the specific things that you said because I think there's a lot of value there, but I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. You'd mentioned the nightly search agent. Can you give a higher level kind of description for what that is for anyone who may not be familiar?
Sure. So a nightly search agent is something that basically, in this context, will perform a search for candidates on the open web. So think of it as a really fancy Boolean search on steroids, essentially, that is going to be programmatically run by a service that is triggered by an event. That event could be posting a new job. That event could be time, like posting a job and then waiting a day. But either way, regardless of how that function is triggered, the intent is that nightly search agent during off work hours will run a search of the open web for candidates based on input parameters that are either in a job description that are being extracted or input parameters that a recruiter will put into the search agent. And then that search agent will go to the open web, find talent from the open web, and bring back their resumes or profiles and ingest them directly into the job into Greenhouse.
Very cool. And is that process almost fully automated?
It is fully automated, and it does exist. It's something that I've done before. So yeah, it's fully automated. It already exists. Not overly difficult. It's basically from a Greenhouse perspective, it's a 3-step process. I mean, you have 3 core components. You have your open API with Greenhouse. You have your subskeleton, and then you have your function. So when you're looking at your function, you're running infrastructure as code. So once a trigger, once an event happens, it fires a trigger, hits your Lambda function, and then all of your data that comes from that nightly search agent is ingested in the greenhouse. One thing that's of note, I think I keep going back and forth between function and Lambda. They're essentially synonymous. I say Lambda because, you know, for us, what we do is this would be done on AWS. So when we're talking about functions on AWS, it's Lambda. If this was on Azure, it'd be Azure functions. But essentially, it's the same. We're talking about infrastructure as code. So whether or not it's a function, whether or not it's Lambda, it's all infrastructure as code.
Awesome. And of course, when you're mentioning AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, right? The cloud hosted provider, of which Azure is another example of that as well too. And then Lambda and Function are basically like different services that you can elect to do specific type of work, which you're talking about, right, Adrian? So I think that's all really interesting. And I would say hardcore people analytics, so well played. Next question for me was going to be with regard to some of this stuff. I imagine there are going to be listeners who are going to have more questions about this, but would you recommend that maybe a little bit less technical recruiting teams, talent acquisition teams, or human resources teams invest more into technology to improve what they're working on, what they're prioritizing, or their recruiting efforts? And if so, how would you recommend teams get started in doing some of these things that you've gotten tremendous value out of?
So I think probably the most important thing first is really for whoever the top line leader is to take a holistic look at their organization and see where their needs are. No two organizations are alike. When I came in, I think we did all of this stuff with the different products and services that our team had. So that was one of the first things we did. But for us, even beyond that, after we quickly transitioned to Greenhouse, another thing for us was training. We spent, aside from this, we spent the next 3 months doing nothing but training. So to answer your question directly, I think it depends on the organization. For us, the next most important thing was, having a team that understood, like I was saying earlier about my background, understood what the technical professionals do that they recruit. We implemented on at TRex, we implemented a AWS training program and curriculum. We worked with, the Chief Human Resources Officer, the COO, our CEO, to basically come up with a training plan that met the policies with the organization and that would, meet the needs of the team and the organization to get everyone AWS certified on the recruiting team. That was really important for us, and I think it's been a technical differentiator because the entire team is AWS certified, and we have 100% pass rate on the team. So, I mean, I think to answer your question, it depends on what the top line leader's assessment is of the organization. I certainly think that it's important to have a sound technical platform, but I don't think we'll ever be able to get away from, having that human factor with the recruiters screening on the ground and having that human interaction. So it really comes down to what the top line leader determines is important.
Excellent. And thank you for sharing. That's been a tremendous amount of awesome value. I want to thank you for sharing that with myself and the audience. Two more questions for you before we let you go. The first is, what resources would you recommend for both myself and our audience to kind of dive into any of this any further? Books, blogs, events, anything of that nature?
So this is kind of asymmetric, but I would say a book called 0 to 1. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's a great book. It's by Peter Thiel. It talks about innovation a lot, and this is a book I go to kind of think about, how I like to approach problems. And the whole premise of the book is it's easy to go from 1 to 10 because once you've established 1, somebody's done it before. So there's a model for it, and you just improve the model. What's really hard is going from 0 to 1, where there's nothing that existed previously, and you're trying to create that first widget, whatever it is. So I recommend 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I also recommend A Tipping Point. anyone who's probably listening to this podcast, I think is probably really good at their profession. They wouldn't be listening if they're not, reading a lot of books, consuming a lot of media for podcasts, doing a lot of research on their own. So I think that everyone is probably well adept at their profession. So I think, the how to approach it part is just as important as the technical part of our job. And so for that reason, those are two books I would recommend.
Those are excellent recommendations. I'm familiar with them. Of course, my background includes technology as well too, and those books are very popular in those circles. And I love that that's what you've mentioned, right? Is because empowering HR, empowering talent acquisition these days doesn't necessarily need to be job specific. You've talked a lot about the value you've gotten out of, branching out using technology and making, empowering your team. So I think that is very consistent as well too, and I would encourage others to do the same. So thank you for sharing those. Then last question I have for you is, who should reach out to you and how can they get in touch?
Really, anyone can reach out to me for any reason, whether it's to ask questions, follow-up questions about what they've heard on this podcast, or any questions for, advice for any migrations they're doing. I've performed a lot of ATS migrations, probably I'd venture to say all the popular ones out there, both modern and some of the legacy platforms. So really anyone can reach out to me for any reason. The best way to get a hold of me is adrian.russo@trexsolutionsllc.com. And I'd be happy to answer any emails and get in contact with anyone that reaches out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for providing that, Adrian, and thank you for being here and sharing your awesome advice.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Sheldon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the People Analytics Podcast powered by StaffGeek. If you or anyone you know is a leader in human resources or talent acquisition and would be interested in being a guest on our show, please reach out to me at Sean@staffgeek.com. That's Sean, SEAN, at StaffGeek, StaffGeek.com. We would love to share your valuable knowledge with our audience. At this point, we'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our show, StaffGeek. StaffGeek helps companies hire smarter by increasing retention and combating turnover, all while reducing time to hire. They do this by creating a customized behavioral assessment around your company's unique culture. Armed with your Fit Tech assessment, you're able to evaluate which candidates are the right fit for your company's culture. Start hiring smarter today with StaffGeek. If you'd like to learn more, reach out to StaffGeek at hello@staffgeek.com or visit them on the web at staffgeek.com.